Okay, let's unpack this. You sent over, well, what looks like a really critical document, kind of charting the course for global tech governance right now.
That's right. It's a joint statement, a really unified position from major data protection and privacy authorities all over the world.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't just some think tank paper, is it? It feels like a blueprint. Signed off. Actionable.
Exactly. It's about how AI development must be engineered to respect fundamental rights. That's the core message.
And the title makes that clear. Joint Statement on Building Trustworthy Data Governance Frameworks to Encourage Development of Innovative and Privacy Protective AI, dated February 11th, 2025. So this is our instructional guide for today's deep dive.
It has to be.
And why does it matter so much? I mean, you look at who signed it.
Yeah.
We're talking 18 officials, 17 jurisdictions. These aren't small players. They enforce rules covering, what, billions of people?
Billions, yes. And it's that sheer global consensus that really elevates this. It takes it from standard policy chat to, well, almost a regulatory mandate in waiting.
Right.
Look at the list.
Right.
I mean, you've got major voices from across Asia, North America, the EU, Korea, France, the UK, Ireland, Australia, Canada, Germany, Italy, Spain. I could go on.
So jurisdictions that often set the tone for digital regulation globally.
Precisely. They're essentially speaking with one voice here, which is rare and significant.
Okay, so our mission today then is what exactly?
Well, I think we should go through this document piece by piece, sequentially. Treat it like that instructional guide you mentioned. For you listening, whether you're a developer, a policy wonk, maybe just curious about AI's future.
Oh,
I'm going to pull out every essential commitment, every nuance, and really analyze the implications, What are these authorities signaling to the global AI ecosystem?
Got it. All right, let's jump right in then. Part 1, the AI paradox opportunity versus risk. This covers the first paragraph. And it starts, maybe predictably, by acknowledging the huge promise of AI. It lists specific benefits.
Yeah, the standard ones,
Yeah.
but important to skate up front.
Right. Benefits for humanity, innovation in science, the economy, society. It's a pretty full-throated recognition of AI's transformative power. We all talk about that. But then, almost immediately, the tone shifts. It pivots straight to the risks. And they detail 2 main categories here.
Yep.
First one, no surprise, given who wrote this, risks to fundamental rights, specifically data protection and privacy. That's their home turf.
Absolutely. Core mandate.
But the second category, this feels really crucial. It covers risks caused by inappropriate processing of data. And they list the big ones: discrimination, misinformation, and hallucination.
And that framing right there in paragraph 1, that's basically the foundation for the entire document. It's why these specific authorities, the data protection authorities or DPAs, are leading this charge.
How so? Explain that connection.
Well, if you connect the dots, they're explicitly saying that things like discrimination, misinformation, hallucination, these aren't just like abstract ethical failures or weird AI quirks. They are direct negative consequences of failures in data governance, failures in how data is processed.
Ah, right. So bad data in, bad results out, but framed as a governance problem.
Exactly. Think about it. An AI system showing discriminatory bias that often comes from training data that's skewed, incomplete, maybe poorly labeled. That's a failure of data processing governance.
Okay, makes sense.
Or when a large language model hallucinates, generates plausible but totally false information. That points to failures in the integrity, the cleaning, the quality control of that whole training data pipeline. Another data governance issue.
So by lumping these social harms, discrimination, hallucination, and these technical issues under the umbrella of privacy and data processing risk, the DPAs are pulling it all back to their core job.
Precisely. They're defining the problem primarily as a data problem, which happens to manifest through AI. It's not just an AI problem floating out there.
Which means the solution isn't necessarily some brand new AI law from scratch.
Not necessarily, no. It suggests the solution lies in the rigorous application, the enforcement of existing data protection principles, but applied across the entire AI development process. It forces the industry, basically, to accept that the road to shiny new AI innovation has to pass through some pretty strict governance checkpoints.
Okay, that idea of strict governance leads us perfectly into part 2, the foundation of trust frameworks and life cycle management. This is paragraph 2. Here, the authorities state that, to get that public trust, to actually harness AI's benefits, the mandate is crystal clear. AI must be developed and deployed according to data protection and privacy rules. And, this bit's interesting, other norms. We might come back to that.
This sets a flag for later.
And to achieve this, they lay out 2 key requirements. Non-negotiables, really. First, embedding privacy by design right from the start, from the initial planning stage.
For a single line of code.
Exactly. Thinking about privacy before you even sketch it out. And second, implementing robust internal data governance frameworks.
And this is where it gets really fascinating, I think. And it's something that industry really needs to pay close attention to. It's the emphasis they place on the entire life cycle.
Right. They say these frameworks need technical and procedural safeguards for managing and mitigating risks throughout the entire life cycle of an AI system. What does that actually mean in practice?
It means we absolutely have to stop thinking about compliance as like a pre-launch checklist, a one-time audit you pass and then forget about.
Okay.
Let's use an analogy. Say a new generative AI model, the initial planning, the design stage that involves the really hard work of making sure the petabytes of training data were collected lawfully, respecting rights. That's the start, but only the start.
So what happens after deployment? That's where the entire life cycle part gets tricky, right?
Right.
How do you maintain that stewardship?
Well, it means ongoing monitoring for a start. Active monitoring. Let's say your deployed model out in the wild starts exhibiting some unforeseen bias or maybe generating harmful content in scenarios you didn't predict. That's a new risk discovered after deployment. Yeah. The governance framework must then mandate procedural safeguards to mitigate that immediately. This could mean pulling the plug temporarily, decommissioning it for a bit. It could mean rapid retraining cycles or maybe implementing algorithmic circuit breakers to stop certain outputs.
Wow. Okay, so that puts a huge ongoing responsibility on developers and deployers. It's not just build and ship.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It demands continuous adaptive stewardship. Traditional compliance often focused on the moment of data collection or maybe registering the processing activity. This is different. This demands budget, staffing, processes dedicated not just to initial development, but to perpetual risk management, monitoring, updating.
That sounds expensive.
And complex.
It is. It's a very heavy standard they're setting. But arguably, it's a necessary response given how quickly AI outputs can evolve and how unpredictable they can sometimes be.
And that need for constant vigilance, that continuous stewardship, it's necessary precisely because, as they point out in paragraph 3, the whole environment around AI development is just incredibly complex.
Bingo. Which brings us neatly to part 3. Understanding the context, why governance is complex. And this is where the document really lays out the sheer scale of the regulatory mountain they need to climb.
It really does.
Here's where it gets really interesting. They break down 5 specific dimensions of this complexity. And they're not treating these as minor hurdles. These are like foundational challenges. Governance won't work unless these are tackled.
Exactly. And it's worth spending some real time on these 5 factors because they explain precisely why a simple one-size-fits-all AI law is probably impossible and why this kind of global coordination we're seeing in the statement is so essential.
Okay, let's break them down.
Let's start with 3A, sectoral deployment. Simple point, big implications. AI isn't just one thing. It's deployed across vastly different sectors. They list examples: health, public services, public security, HR, education.
And the implication there is immediate, isn't it? The risk profile changes dramatically depending on where the AI is actually being used.
Precisely. Yeah. Totally different ballgame. If an AI is, say, optimizing warehouse logistics, relatively low stakes, right? A failure might mess up inventory, cost some money, manageable, maybe.
Okay.
But contrast that with an AI used for diagnosing cancer from medical stands. Or predictive policing in public security. A failure there isn't about inventory, it's about lives, liberty, fundamental rights.
So the governance needs to be tailored.
It has to be.
Yeah.
No single framework fits all. The DPAs are clearly signaling here that their guidance, their enforcement, it's going to have to be sector-specific and risk-stratified, which, by the way, is a massive undertaking for them. It means writing multiple regulatory playbooks, not just one rule book. Huge task.
Okay, factor 1, sectoral diversity. What's next? 3B, stakeholder complexity. This sounds messy.
Oh, it is. This describes the regulatory maze. Yeah. Involvement of a great number of stakeholders scattered all over the world, creating complex value chains.
And they list them out. Dataset creators, model providers, hosting platforms, integrators, annotators, deployers, end users. A whole ecosystem. This just screams accountability nightmare. If an AI system messes up, say it unfairly rejects a qualified job applicant because of bias, who does the regulator actually go after? Who pays the fine?
Exactly. Is it the company that hired the annotators in, say, country A, who maybe mislabeled data? Is it the big tech platform hosting the model in country B? Or is it the employer who deployed the system in country C?
It could be any or all of them, couldn't it?
That's the core challenge of this diffuse accountability. Historically, regulators usually targeted the final data controller, the entity making the ultimate decision using the data. But in these complex AI value chains, the root cause of the harm, the actual flaw, might be traced way back upstream, maybe to the initial dataset creator, who could be a tiny outfit, maybe non-compliant, maybe located completely outside the regulator's jurisdiction.
Right.
So the document is basically acknowledging that the current regulatory toolbox, which is built around these clearer lines of responsibility, is just not well equipped for this global, fragmented reality.
So what's the solution?
Well, it forces regulators to explore new ideas, new theories of liability. Maybe they target the players with the deepest pockets, or the ones with the most control over the data flow, regardless of where they sit in that chain. It also screams for much, much better international cooperation between regulators. Otherwise, enforcement just hits a wall at the border.
Okay, complexity factor 2. The tangled web of stakeholders. Now, 3C, operational scale. This seems more straightforward. It's just about the sheer size of it all.
Size and volume, yeah. AI tech needs vast amounts of data, operating at a very large scale.
What's the regulatory challenge there? Isn't big data something regulators already deal with?
They do, but this is potentially orders of magnitude bigger. And it fundamentally challenges traditional ideas about data control and, crucially, auditability. We're talking data sets measured in petabytes, maybe even exabytes soon.
Yeah.
Billions, potentially trillions of individual data points fueling these models. Now imagine you're a DPA auditor. Your job is to verify that every single piece of personal data used to train that massive model was obtained lawfully, processed fairly, respected data subject rights.
Impossible. You couldn't possibly check every single entry.
Exactly. The sheer volume makes comprehensive, granular auditing virtually impossible, even with sophisticated tools. It's just too big.
So regulators have to change tack.
They have to. They need to shift their focus. Instead of trying to audit every data point, which they can't do, they need to audit the governance processes themselves. Are the company's internal controls robust? Are their risk assessments sound? Are their data handling procedures compliant? It's a move from checking the micro details to verifying the integrity of the macro process.
Auditing the system, not every piece of data within it.
Precisely. It's about trusting but verifying the internal governance framework that the company claims to have in place.
Okay, that makes sense. And that inability to control every single piece of data leads directly into the next point. Third, processing challenges. This talks about complex data processing posing significant challenges for its control, which then increases the need for transparency to protect rights. This sounds like the black box problem everyone talks about.
It's exactly that. They're pointing squarely at the black box issue. The regulatory headache here is that when a complex AI model makes a decision, say, approves a loan or flags a transaction, the pathway from the input data to that final output, that prediction, is often incredibly opaque. It involves millions, maybe billions, of complex mathematical calculations.
A black box. We don't know exactly how it reached the conclusion.
Right, and that opacity becomes a major problem when an individual tries to exercise their fundamental data protection rights, like the right to an explanation for an automated decision, or the right to object to it. How can you get a meaningful explanation if nobody, not even the developer sometimes, fully understands the intricate reasoning path?
You can't, really.
So the document argues that protecting these fundamental rights necessitates transparency. It's not optional. And this isn't just about, making the source code open that often doesn't help much anyway.
So what kind of transparency are they looking for?
It involves deploying specific tools and techniques, things like explainable AI, XAI methods. It means publishing detailed model cards or data sheets for data sets that describe a model's performance, its limitations, where the training data came from, known biases. It means conducting thorough impact assessments before deployment.
So they're demanding developers effectively reverse engineer transparency into their systems.
In a way, yes. They're making transparency a core prerequisite for lawful processing, no matter how technically difficult it might be to achieve. The difficulty isn't an excuse.
Okay, that's a high bar. And finally, the fifth dimension of complexity. 3E, pace of evolution. AI evolves at a very fast pace. Major breakthroughs happening on a daily basis.
Yeah, this is maybe the existential threat to effective regulation in this space.
Why existential?
Because governance systems, laws, regulations, they're inherently slow-moving beasts, right? They involve political debate, legislative cycles, public consultations. It often takes years to get a new rule in place.
Okay.
But the underlying technology here, whether it's New multimodal models, breakthroughs in synthetic data, more sophisticated deepfakes. It's shifting daily, weekly. Any static law written today could be hopelessly obsolete by the time it actually comes into force.
So how can regulators possibly keep up?
That's the million-dollar question. This factor basically dictates that the authorities cannot rely solely on traditional, fixed, static rulemaking. It won't work. They have to pursue governance systems that are much more flexible, adaptive, iterative, things that can evolve alongside the tech.
Is that why we're seeing more things like guidelines, codes of conduct, soft law?
Exactly. And things like the regulatory sandboxes we'll get to later, they need tools that allow them to operate much closer to the technology's own speed, that rapid cycle of observe, orient, decide, act. Government typically moves much slower than that, so they need new mechanisms.
Wow. Okay, so those 5 factors, sectoral deployment, stakeholder complexity, massive scale, processing opacity, and blinding speed, really paint a picture of why governing AI is such a monumental challenge.
Absolutely. It sets the stage for why the next section is so important.
Right. So after laying all that out, the authorities acknowledge that they, the regulators, are also under intense pressure. Which brings us to part 4. The push for legal certainty. This is paragraph 4. The document states pretty clearly, citizens and businesses' need for answers and legal certainty is pressuring authorities. They feel the heat to enable AI development, but within these trustworthy frameworks.
They're caught in the middle, aren't they?
Seems like it. And the tension is spelled out. It's a dual constraint. The rules must provide a sufficient degree of flexibility for various innovative efforts, and they must be consistent with the protection of privacy and personal data.
That sounds like trying to square the circle, doesn't it? Flexibility and protection.
How do you actually do that?
Well, it is the ultimate tightrope walk for regulators. They absolutely recognize that regulatory uncertainty kills innovation. If businesses, especially startups, don't know what the rules are, or if they fear getting slammed with huge fines for using complex new tech that nobody fully understands yet, they'll just pull back. They won't invest.
So the authorities need to provide some clarity, some breathing room.
Exactly. And what this paragraph signals, I think, is a commitment from the DPAs to prioritize proactive support and guidance, not just reactive enforcement after things go wrong.
Okay.
The document explicitly mentions the importance of supporting players in the AI ecosystem in their efforts to comply. That's a significant phrase. It suggests a shift, or at least a balancing act, where providing compliance guidance, actually helping developers figure out how to build things lawfully, becomes just as critical a function for the regulator as wielding the enforcement stick.
Helping them get it right, rather than just punishing them when they get it wrong.
Precisely. The stated core principle here, the goal, is to help reconcile innovation with respect for individuals' rights. That's the balancing act they are publicly committing to undertake, and the rest of the document outlines how they plan to attempt it.
Okay, that political commitment then transitions us nicely into the real action items. We're moving into the section titled Highlighting Data Protection Authorities' Leading Role in Shaping Data Governance. So we're shifting from observation and context setting to concrete commitments.
Yep, this is where they lay out their plan.
Let's start with part 5, commitments, lawful processing, and proportionality. 2 key commitments here in paragraphs 5 and 6. Commitment number 1 in paragraph 5. They commit to fostering a shared understanding of the lawful grounds for processing data specifically for AI training across all their different jurisdictions.
Harmonization, basically, trying to get on the same page.
Right. And they confirm the usual suspects for lawful bases: consent, contractual necessity, legitimate interests, or other legal justifications provided by law. Standard stuff.
Pretty standard, yes.
But then they add this layer of detail, this checklist of factors that must be considered. Attention must be paid to, the specific purposes of the AI development, the characteristics of the data needed, associated risk mitigation strategies, and crucially, the reasonable expectation of data subjects.
Ah, yes. That phrase, reasonable expectation of data subjects, that is arguably the most potent, maybe even revolutionary element in this entire section, especially for data controllers and developers.
Why a revolutionary? It sounds reasonable.
It sounds reasonable, but it shifts the whole calculus of determining legality. It moves the assessment beyond just ticking a statutory box like we have consent or we claim legitimate interest and forces a much deeper dive into contextual ethics.
Okay, unpack that. How does it work in practice?
Well, under traditional data protection thinking, a company might argue, okay, we scraped a load of publicly available data, maybe professional profiles from a networking site or posts from public online forums to train our new AI model. They might then claim legitimate interest as their legal basis. The data was public, after all. They might tick the box and move on.
But the reasonable expectation clause throws a wrench in that.
A massive wrench, because it forces the company to ask. Just because that data was technically public, did the individual who posted it reasonably expect that it would be hoovered up by the terabyte, fed into a massive AI model, potentially used to train a system that could mimic their writing style, generate deepfakes of them, or even power a tool that might eventually put them out of a job?
Probably not in most cases.
Probably not. It forces developers and data controllers to genuinely step into the shoes of the individual whose data they want to use. And the expectation will vary, right? If the processing involves really sensitive data health information, for example, or if the resulting AI system poses significant risks like mass surveillance tech or automated welfare decisions, then the individual's reasonable expectation of privacy will naturally be much higher.
Which makes claiming something like legitimate interest much harder to justify in those high-risk contexts.
Much, much harder.
Mhm.
It means that risk mitigation strategies, things like robust anonymization or using synthetic data instead of real data where possible, or employing differential privacy techniques, these move from being nice-to-have best practices to potentially becoming necessary prerequisites just to establish the fundamental lawfulness of the processing in the first place. You might need them just to meet the reasonable expectation test.
Wow. Okay, that really does elevate the bar for justifying data use, especially scraped public data. It's a game changer for compliance teams.
Absolutely. It demands a much more rigorous, upfront, anticipatory harm assessment before training even begins.
Okay, let's move to the second commitment in this part, paragraph 6. This one focuses on information exchange and safety measures. The stated goal is to exchange information and establish a shared understanding of proportionate safety measures.
Sharing knowledge, basically, and aiming for consistency again.
And they insist these safety measures must meet two criteria. First, grounded in rigorous scientific and evidence-based assessments, and second, tailored to diversity of use cases. That links back to the sectoral complexity we talked about.
Exactly. And notice the linkage back to complexity factor 3E, the rapid pace of evolution.
Yeah.
They explicitly state that the relevance of these safety measures should be regularly updated to keep pace with evolving AI data processing technologies and practices.
So no static safety rules. They have to adapt.
Precisely. This signals a clear move towards regulatory agility. Forget publishing a fixed list of approved security techniques that becomes outdated in 6 months.
So what does rigorous scientific and evidence-based assessments actually mean for a developer? How do they prove their measures meet that standard?
Well, it means the regulators themselves need to get much more technically savvy, for one thing. They can't just rely on interpreting legal texts anymore. They need to actively integrate current scientific understanding of how AI models work, how they fail, what the latest security vulnerabilities are, what the state of the art in defense is.
So the regulators need data scientists on staff, essentially.
Essentially, yes,
Yeah.
or access to that expertise. And it means instead of issuing a simple static rule like you must always use encryption, their guidance might become much more dynamic and conditional. Something like, for AI model type X, deployed in high-risk context Y, you must demonstrate through empirical testing that your safety measures maintain a real-time risk score below threshold Z based on currently understood adversarial attack vectors.
That sounds much more complex, but also more effective.
It's adaptive regulation. It shifts the burden onto the developer to prove, using scientific evidence and testing, that their chosen safety measures are genuinely proportionate and effective against the current threat landscape, not just the threats we knew about last year. It really elevates the standard for due diligence and ongoing validation across the entire industry.
Okay, that commitment to adaptive evidence-based safety leads us into part 6. Commitments focusing on monitoring, transparency, and creating innovation space. Let's look at commitment 3, found in paragraph 7. This one's about continuous monitoring and also leveraging collaboration. The scope seems quite broad. Continuously monitor both the technical and societal implications of AI. So not just the tech, but its impact.
That's crucial, the social impact piece.
And here's the collaboration bit. They commit to leveraging the expertise and experience not just of their own DPAs, but also of other relevant entities, and they specifically name names. NGOs, public authorities, academia, and businesses. They want to tap into this wider network for AI policy matters when possible.
Yeah, I call this the broader tent commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And it speaks volumes, really. It's a clear admission, or maybe realization, that government bodies, regulators on their own, simply cannot manage the sheer complexity of AI governance by themselves. They don't have the full spectrum of knowledge needed in-house.
So why specifically NGOs and academia? What do they bring that, say, business or government doesn't?
Well, think about it. NGOs often bring that critical societal perspective, right? They're often the ones on the ground, highlighting the ethical harms, the disparate impacts on vulnerable groups, the civil rights implications that purely technical or governmental monitoring might easily miss.
Okay, the societal watchdog role.
Exactly. And academia. They often hold the cutting-edge technical expertise. They're the ones researching the deepest flaws in current models, understanding the nuances of data leakage or new adversarial attacks, and exploring potential technical solutions. Expertise that regulators might struggle to maintain internally given the pace of change.
So it sounds like the authorities are basically saying, look, the expertise we need is scattered outside our own walls, and effective policy demands we bring those diverse, sometimes critical, maybe even conflicting viewpoints into the room.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It strongly implies that future AI policymaking, if this commitment is followed through, should become a genuinely multi-stakeholder exercise. It's about ensuring regulation isn't technically naive, written by lawyers who don't grasp TensorFlow, but also that it isn't socially blind, written by engineers who might overlook the profound civil rights impacts.
Finding that
It's
balance.
an essential step, I think, towards developing policies that are not only robust, but also seen as legitimate by the broader public and the diverse communities affected by AI.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's move to the next commitment, number 4, in paragraph 8. This one seems focused on providing some practical breathing room for development. It feels like a direct response to that plea for flexibility we discussed earlier.
It absolutely is.
The primary goal stated here is to reduce legal uncertainties and secure space for innovation, especially where data processing is essential for AI development. And they point to specific tools they intend to use, things like regulatory sandboxes and tools for sharing best practices. Now, we hear the term regulatory sandbox thrown around quite a bit in tech policy circles, but what does it actually mean for, say, a startup trying to innovate in a field as legally fuzzy and fast-moving as AI?
Yeah, it's a good question because it can sound a bit vague. But this is really where the rubber meets the road on that commitment to flexibility. A regulatory sandbox isn't just a buzzword, it's a specific practical mechanism.
Okay.
Essentially, it's a controlled temporary environment. Regulators set it up, and they allow selected innovative companies, often startups or firms, testing truly novel ideas to trial new products, services, or AI models with certain regulatory requirements relaxed or modified. Crucially, this happens under the active supervision and guidance of the DPA.
Ah, so it's like a safe space to test things that might currently bump up against existing rules.
Exactly. The benefit is huge, especially for smaller players.
Yeah.
Let's say you're a startup developing a novel AI model that uses a new technique for de-identifying sensitive data, maybe pushing the boundaries of what current data protection law explicitly allows. Instead of launching it and immediately risking massive fines or years of legal battles over whether your technique is compliant, you apply to enter the sandbox. If accepted, the regulators work with you. They agree upfront on specific parameters. What data you can use, for how long the test runs, what safeguards you must have, what outcomes and metrics they will monitor closely.
So it dramatically reduces the market entry risk, right? Because you're getting direct regulatory feedback before you go live to the mass market. You find out if your approach is acceptable or needs tweaking in a controlled way.
Precisely. It provides a pocket of legal certainty within that defined time-bound context of the sandbox. It allows learning, both for the company and for the regulator, who gets firsthand insight into the new technology and its implications.
But there are conditions, presumably.
Oh, absolutely. The document is clear. These sandboxes and other tools must still be grounded in public trust and remain consistent with principles of privacy and data protection. It's not a free-for-all, it's supervised experimentation. But it is a very practical mechanism for fostering innovation while managing risks, and it shows the authorities are serious about providing that supportive space, not just issuing top-down mandates.
Okay, sandboxes as a key tool for balancing innovation and protection. That brings us to the final part, part 7, commitment cross-regulatory synergy. This is paragraph 9, the last action point. And this one seems to look outwards beyond just data protection.
It does. It broadens the lens significantly.
The final commitment here is to strengthen interactions with a whole bunch of other relevant authorities. They specifically call out those in charge of competition, consumer protection, and intellectual property.
Key areas, all heavily impacted by AI.
And the purpose: to facilitate consistency and foster synergies between all these different applicable regulatory frameworks as they apply to AI systems, tools, and applications. They also add that dialogues involving diverse players in the AI ecosystem should be encouraged here, too.
Right. This closing commitment, you could argue, is the authorities basically delivering their final synthesis. It's their explicit recognition that AI is fundamentally a horizontal issue. It cuts across so many different domains that it simply cannot be governed effectively by data privacy regulators working in isolation.
So they need to break down the regulatory silos.
Exactly. Governing AI effectively demands it. Let's quickly think about why these specific partners, competition, consumer protection, IP, are so critical. Competition authorities. Why them? Because the economics of AI, especially foundational models, often require absolutely massive data sets and computational power. This naturally creates incredibly high barriers to entry and risks leading to powerful data monopolies or oligopolies, which can stifle market competition and innovation. Competition watchdogs need to be involved to monitor market concentration, data access issues, potential anti-competitive practices by dominant platforms.
Makes sense. What about consumer protection?
Well, AI increasingly defines the entire user relationship, doesn't it? It powers recommendation engines, sets dynamic prices, makes automated decisions about eligibility for services, even shapes the information environment through personalized content feeds. Consumer protection regulators need to be deeply involved to ensure transparency around these automated systems, to fight unfair or deceptive practices driven by algorithms, and to protect consumers from algorithmic manipulation or discrimination.
Okay, so competition handles market structure, consumer protection handles the user interface. What about intellectual property, IP? That feels huge given how much training data is scraped from the web.
Absolutely critical. You've hit the nail on the head. The massive data sets used to train AI models and the proprietary models themselves that result from that training. These are enormous intellectual assets, but their creation and use constantly brush up against existing copyright laws, database rights, patent law potentially.
Yeah, there are major lawsuits happening right now about this.
Exactly. If the DPAs issue guidance on, say, lawful data scraping for training, but that guidance completely ignores or conflicts with how IP law treats the same activity, then developers are caught in an impossible bind. They face conflicting regulatory demands.
So synergy is essential to avoid contradictions.
It's essential. This final commitment signals a push for a more unified regulatory front on AI. It acknowledges that consistency across data protection, competition, consumer rights, and IP is absolutely necessary. Otherwise, you risk creating loopholes, regulatory arbitrage, where companies exploit inconsistencies between regimes, or just general chaos and uncertainty for developers trying to do the right thing.
It's really the capstone on this whole instructional guide, isn't it? Acknowledging that effective global AI governance requires integration, collaboration, and a broad regulatory consensus to actually work.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It shows they understand the scope.
Okay, let's try and quickly synthesize this really powerful, dense instructional document for everyone listening. We started by seeing the authorities frame the core challenge, that AI paradox of immense opportunity versus significant risk. Then they laid out why governance is so incredibly difficult, that fivefold complexity, the diverse sectoral uses, the tangled global stakeholder chains, the sheer operational scale, the black box processing challenges, and that relentless pace of technological evolution.
The foundations of the problem.
But then, crucially, we moved into the how, the concrete commitments they're making. And some of these are pretty demanding, bordering on revolutionary for regulation, aren't they?
They really are.
Like requiring that deeply contextual, reasonable, expectations-based approach to judging lawful data processing, committing to safety measures that are scientific, evidence-based, and constantly adapting.
Big shifts there.
Opening up the policymaking tent to bring in that vital external expertise from NGOs, academia, and others, and then providing those practical innovation spaces like regulatory sandboxes to try and actually reconcile that tension between development and protection.
Yeah.
The big takeaway seems to be that the future of AI regulation, at least as envisioned by these global authorities, is going to be adaptive, continuous, collaborative, and intensely focused on embedding robust governance throughout the entire AI lifecycle, from cradle to grave.
Absolutely. I think that's the core message. If there's one foundational takeaway, it's that these global regulatory bodies are collectively demanding full lifecycle data governance. They're shifting the compliance focus away from maybe one-time checks or registrations towards demonstrating continuous, responsible stewardship of data and models.
And linking failures back to governance.
Right. In this view, a compliance failure, like biased output or a major data leak from a model, isn't just a technical glitch. It's fundamentally a governance failure. And that failure can directly result in those significant social harms they flagged right at the start, like discrimination or widespread misinformation.
Okay.
But maybe let me leave you, the listener, with a final provocation, something to mull over, and it builds directly on the document itself.
Go for it.
Think back to paragraph 2. It mandated that AI must be developed and deployed not just according to data protection and privacy rules, but also according to other norms. Remember that phrase?
Yeah, we flagged it.
Yeah.
What are those other norms?
Exactly. The document doesn't explicitly define them. Now, combine that ambiguity with the incredible complexity we unpacked from paragraph 3, the global stakeholders, the diverse sectors, the rapid evolution, the difficulty of even harmonizing existing laws like data protection across borders. Okay? So the provocation is this. Given all that complexity, which specific other norms that go beyond established privacy law or even beyond the synergies they mentioned with competition and IP law, which ones do you think will prove the hardest to define, harmonize globally, and actually integrate into the governance frameworks for the next generation of AI systems?
That's tough. What kind of norms are we even talking about?
Well, could it be fundamental international human rights standards, like ensuring AI doesn't unduly restrict freedom of expression or assembly? Could it be emerging norms around environmental sustainability, given the huge energy footprint of some AI models? Could it be geopolitical norms about who controls foundational models or critical AI infrastructure? Or maybe ethical norms about fairness that go beyond just non-discrimination?
Wow. Yeah, defining and enforcing those globally seems like a monumental task.
Monumental. It seems to me that the real friction, the biggest regulatory battles, and deepest philosophical debates in the coming years might lie precisely in that undefined space, the tension between established, codified law and these emerging, contested, but critically important other norms that AI forces us to confront. That's where the governance challenge gets really profound.
That is definitely the ultimate question, isn't it? Shaping not just AI, but potentially our global digital future.
Yeah.
A lot to think about there. Thank you for diving deep into these vital sources with us today. And thank you, our listeners, for joining us. We really encourage you to keep exploring this incredibly important space of global digital governance. Until next time, keep thinking critically.